Really quickly. Hi, a very good afternoon, everybody. What a pleasure to see everyone here today. It is a rainy day on my side here. I'm not sure how is it like on your end. I just want to say hi. My name is Kim Pong, and I am the CEO and founder of Strength Asia. So today is really a great pleasure for my team and I, to be here sharing with you on a topic that is really close to my heart, creating, speak up culture, with psychological safety. Now, before we, get on to the sharing and the talk, a couple of things here, right? I'm really curious to find out, who's actually listening to this session on the other end. So if I can ask everybody to just use your chat box, turn on the video, say hi to me. So if you can see me, you can hear me loud and clear, wave your hands at me so I know that, I'm talking to live bodies and not videos. All right, cool. Thank you so much. Lovely. And the other thing is this, right? If you could just put into the chat box and just, share a little bit about, where are you coming in from, right? Are you coming in from Singapore, Indonesia, India, wherever, right? Would love to know, whereabouts are you, tuning in from. So go ahead and do that. And also share with me, are you working from home or are you working from the office? So that's going to be really interesting information for me. Lovely. A lot of folks here are from Singapore. Wonderful. I feel extremely at home in the presence of everybody here. We got somebody from Hong Kong. Lovely. Beautiful. Welcome, everybody. So thank you so much. I see someone from Indonesia. Beautiful. Lovely. Oh, from in Vancouver. Wow. That is pretty cool. Great. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming today. And one of the things I'm going to ask you to do is that I'm going to be sharing for about maybe 45 minutes. And in the course of my sharing, what I'd like you to do is, to use the chat box, right? And, if there's any question that kind of pop up in the course of my sharing, quickly kind of plonk it in. Because my experience is that when you begin to put the questions into the chat box, the minute you have the question, by the time we get to the end of the session, we have a list of questions that we can immediately get onto, right? So do that. If you get the questions while I'm talking, go ahead and just plonk it into the chat box here. Beautiful. So let me just start with everybody here, right? With a quick question, and I'd love you to use the chat box here. A speak up culture, right? In your teams, in your organization. Now, why is a speak up culture something that is desirable for us? So I'd love to hear your response on the chat box together with me, right? What do you think? If you have a speak up culture in your organization, what does it do for you? What does it do for your teams? What does it do for your organization? So if you could use a chat box, few words, simple phrases. I would love to hear, your understanding or your desire for the speak up culture in your organization. So let me see what is this, right? So Che Kian says, get to know the ground better. Absolutely, right? So we kind of know what people are thinking. We kind of know, why do you say certain things? People just have that ability to do that. Molly talks about the they need to know about people's opinions and feelings. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Michael talks about, more meaningful collaborations to achieve greater goals. Yeah, a culture that's not a speak up culture, a lot of times you're not really quite sure, why people are remaining quiet. You're really not quite sure what's the thinking behind, the staring eyes, right, in that sense. Audrey Pereira talks about building trust. Yeah, more knowns make people more open to different views and perspective. Absolutely agree on that. Ngiam Wee Heng talks about understanding where our blind spots are. Yeah, I really like that. And this is something that I really appreciate of my team. They'll tell me things that I thought I'm really darn good in, but actually not so good. And I say, hey, Pong, I don't think too much of yourself, but I think you're about here. Very cool. Anuradha says to understand each other more and to move on easily. Yep. Rebecca says establishing authentic relationships. Jennifer Pang talks about having a speak-up culture. There's a sense of belonging. I agree. A sense of belonging. Having ownership for the organization movement. Absolutely agree with that. Vanessa talks about being heard, contributing great ideas and perspectives to create more value and impact for business. Lovely. Thank you for that. One more question before I share. Psychological safety. I'm very curious to find out from you if you have ever heard the word or the phrase psychological safety. What does it mean to you? What is a definition of psychological safety according to your own personal definitions and ideas. So once again, use the chat box. Share with me what is your understanding of psychological safety. So while you're doing that, yeah. So I think Vanessa talks about to be heard, to contribute great ideas, perspectives, to create more value and impact for the business. Yes. Nyam talks about agree to disagree. Yes. Vanessa talks about, no fear of judgment, to speak up openly and honestly. Sharon talks about a safe space to share ideas, opinions without the fear of being judged, diminished, and discriminated. Audrey talks about the knowledge that you will not be judged, abused, penalized for being honest in your views. I love that. And Rilin, I love this. Rilin says, boss will not mark me. I love that. That is lovely. Great. So thank you so much, everybody, for sharing that. So let's get started, with our talk today. Today we are talking about creating a speak-up culture, with psychological safety. Talk is probably the most repeated, right? The way we talk is probably the most repeated and present behavior of people around us. At work, it demands that, we are actually effective at it, that we are good in the way we talk. Yet, very often, we tend to skip over how people talk to one another, right? Now, if you think about it, in any single day, every one of us actually speaks an average of about 16,000 words a day. Now, to me, that is a lot of words, right? And how many of these words, you wonder, that we use every day actually has an ability to convey the very meaning and intentions the way we actually meant it? It made me think a lot about, this idea. How can we not waste words, at the same time, increase the influence, of our words? The very fact that when you and I speak so many words in any single day, it actually opens up that possibility that each time when we open our mouth to talk, there will always be interpersonal risk. I believe that people's intentions in our organizations are, usually good. We want to mean what we say, and the intentions are good. They're not bad. They're not evil. The intention is to share, to engage people, to develop, to challenge, to improve, to learn, to innovate, and all this good stuff, right? But very often, those intentions are not necessarily experienced the way we intended it to be. Instead, the reverse is true. In conversation with people, let me ask you this question, right? Have you guys ever felt, that you're being snubbed, or you're being ignored, or you're silenced, or you're patronized, or you're neglected, or you're brushed off, right? Or being ostracized or humiliated, or even being embarrassed here? The truth is that, every one of us actually has been there before. How you and I talk, ladies and gentlemen, affects how others think, feel, and behave around us. So my question to you here is this, right? Do the way we talk get people to be engaged and be connected with us? Do they feel safe with us? Do they feel accepted? Do they feel that they're able to, ask their questions, share their concerns, and speak their minds, in front of us? Or does our talk instill fear, instill anxiety in people, get people to be defensive, get people to be overwhelmed, get people to be conflicted, get people to be silenced, when we are talking? In all its forms of talking and the experience that we give to people, fear is something that activates the pain centers in our brain. And when that happens, right, it triggers off a defensive mechanism, and it is a self-censoring instinct. It essentially does something, that, make us become a lot more aware of what we're doing. It paralyzes our performances, it freezes our initiative, and essentially it smothers innovation. How we relate and respond to one another through our talk, has a direct impact, on the psychological safety in terms in our teams, in our relationships, and in our organizations every day. And like many of you, said it beautifully and correctly just now, in my questions to you, psychological safety is feeling safe, interacting with one another without the fear of being embarrassed, without the fear of being punished, without the fear of being ignored. Do we feel the safety of inclusion when we are talking to people? Do we feel the safety of learning when I'm talking to you? Do I feel the safety of contribution? Do I feel the safety of being invited to contribute, right? Do I feel the safety of challenging status quo here? Now, according to this guy called Timothy Clark, and I like his thoughts in this area of psychological safety. He's the author of this book called The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety, and he essentially said there are 4 things that we need in order for every one of us to thrive in social settings. The first one, right, really is about the safety of inclusion. The second one is the safety of contribution, the safety of learning and growth, and the last one is the safety of challenge. In other words, right, when our teams are psychologically safe, we are including people, we are learning, we are contributing, we are challenging. We have the curiosity, we have the courage, we have the candor, and we have the confidence to ask questions, share our concerns, and speak our minds without fear and consequences. And listen to me on this, right? Every one of us in the organization impacts psychological safety. But if you are a leader, and the higher you are in the hierarchy of leadership, you want to listen to this, right? You actually are a lot more infectious, right, in the space of psychological safety here. Where often this critical behavior, psychological safety, affects the way we talk and the way we listen to one another. How we talk as a leader is highly infectious to the psychological safety in our organization. Now, I want to share a really quick research with you, and I'm sure some of you actually have heard about it. And this is the Google project called the Project Aristotle. Now, what happened is this, right? Google believed that people in the organizations, that employees actually do better, do more together, rather than working alone on their own here. So in 2012, they started this Project Aristotle with the whole idea of trying to answer one simple question: what makes a team effective? What makes a high-performing team here? And what they found out was really interesting. They studied about 180 teams to figure out why some teams failed miserably and why some other teams, right, succeed spectacularly, right? And this is what they found. They found that highly performing and effective teams have 5 very specific traits, right? So let me just share with you what these 5 traits are. The first trait essentially is this, right? It's psychological safety. The second trait is clear goals in the teams. The third trait is dependable colleagues. The fourth trait, they know the meaning of work. And the fifth trait is the impact of work. And out of these 5 traits here, the most important and the most critical important trait for successful, effective teams was, you guessed it, right? Psychological safety. And it underpins all the other 4 traits that I mentioned to you just now. What the researchers found out, everybody, was this simple idea: that the most successful teams were not comprised of how intelligent, how creative, how talented the team members were, but it was how psychologically safe, such a tongue twister, how psychologically safe they all felt. Now, even the most high-powered employees at Google needed a psychologically safe space and environment to contribute to the talents that they all had to offer. Our sense of safety, ladies and gentlemen, will determine, right, if our culture is going to be a speak-up culture or is it going to be a shut-up culture. It determines, how we talk, right? And how we talk will dictate how safe we feel. How you and I talk will affect how other people think, feel, and behave around us. And in turn, how psychologically safe we make each other feel. So up to this point in time here, I'm going to ask you a really quick question here, right? Do you know how you talk? So, and like I said, talk is the most present and persistent behavior in every one of us here. We talk every day. And we talk about 16,000 words a day. So my question to you is this, right? Do you know how you talk? So question, everybody, can I just check in with you, right? Using the chat box here. Do you know how you talk? So the answer is a yes or no answer. Go ahead and let me know your answers. All right, no, very interesting. All right, cool, keep it going. Yes, no. Okay, Check-in says no, Nyam says yes, RT says no, yes sometimes from all 3. Very cool. When they say sometimes yes, sometimes no. Very cool. So I think I could safely say that there is a little spread of between yeses and nos, right? Now that's a very interesting piece of information for me, and it's got implication on psychological safety around us. So my question was this, right? Do you know how you talk? Well, essentially, I think the way we talk, it's essentially a response to what we are hearing from people. And the way we respond to people in our talk, we can categorize it under four very simple ideas here. The first one essentially is this, right? It is about, do we destroy the conversation? Or do we ignore the conversation? Or do we patronize the conversation? Or do we engage the conversation? So the way we talk to people is that we could be destroying, we could be ignoring, we could be patronizing, or we could be engaging here. So let me just give you a couple of examples as to what I mean by all this, right? Destroying, right? So in this case, destroying. Now, to destroy a conversation simply means, right? Say, for example, Dina comes to me and say, "Hey, Kim Pong, I just had the most amazing pizza at Mario's," right? And the way I can respond by destroying the conversation is simply like, "My gosh, that's the worst place you can ever go to for a pizza here, right? Because the best place to go to pizza is Limacao, right? Or is Luigi's Pizza. That's the best pizza ever." So what did I do? Basically, Dina shared something with me, and what I did was to destroy her idea, destroy her opinion, and say, "Look, my idea is a better idea." That's destroying. Now, have you ever felt this before? Have you experienced this before? Or have you ever done this to people before? The second way, which is to, ignore the conversation. Same thing. Dina comes to me once again and say, "Hey, Kim Pong, I just had the most amazing pizza at Mario's," right? And I essentially say, "Hey, did you actually sign up for the talk by Strength Asia?" Right? What did I do? I essentially ignored her conversation and I changed the topic and inserted my own opinion or my own topic into the conversation. That's ignoring the conversation. The third way of responding to a conversation is to patronize the conversation. So once again, Dina comes to me and says, "Hey, Kim Pong, I just had the most amazing, pizza at Mario's," right? And the way I can patronize her would be, "Oh my gosh, the pizza is good, huh? Oh, by the way, did you sign up for the talk by Kim Pong from Strength Asia?" Right? Same thing. We gave the topic a passing mention and then we move on and inserted our own ideas, inserted our own, talking point here. That's patronizing the conversation. Once again, think about, have you done this to people? Or, have people ever done this to you? And last but not least, is to engage the conversation. So once again, Dina comes to me again and says, "Hey, Kim Pong, I just had the most amazing pizza at Mario's," right? And the way I engage the conversation is to show curiosity, to show interest, and to talk about what she wants to talk about. "Oh gosh, I've never been to Mario's before," right? "How was that like? And who went with you?" Now the idea is a really simple idea. We can either destroy, we can either ignore, or we can either patronize. So does all this sound familiar? And I'm very sure every one of us, we've responded to one another, in that following form one way or another. And I want to share with you a quick story here, right? This is between my wife and I, and my wife and I, we've been married for more than 30 years. I love her very, very much. I adore her, right? And, some time ago I asked her, "Honey, in our conversations with one another, how have I been responding to you, right? Do I destroy the conversation? Do I ignore it? Do I patronize it? Or do I engage it?" Now, mind you, I am very confident in asking the question because I know the answer, right? And the answer was, of course, I engage my wife, right? Because that's the way I talk to her. And then my wife thought for a little while, and then she looked up and she said, "Hey, honey, don't get me wrong here. I love you very much, and I know you love me very much, but my feedback to you is very often when you are talking to me, you are almost, you very frequently, not always, but you very frequently, would destroy and ignore my conversations." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, really? How can that be, right? I mean, it's impossible. For 30 years, I've been engaging you, and now you tell me I've been destroying and ignoring your conversations." Now, that is horrendous, everyone. And I asked my wife, why did I do that? Why is that the case? And she said this, she said, "I know you meant good, but a lot of times when I'm talking to you, you'll be telling me all your advices, you'll be telling me all your opinions, you'll be giving me all the solutions, you'll be telling me what to do, where to go, how to do it, right? When actually what I really want is for you to hear me and engage me in my conversation." Now, this is really what I meant by this, right? In the first question I'd ask everybody just now, do you know how you talk? I thought I was engaging my wife, but obviously I wasn't. Now, ever since that incident, right, it's been quite interesting because the both of us right now, we use this fall responses really well. Hold on, Kim Pong. I think you are ignoring me. Can you just kind of read back to me what I just said to you, right? So it's been really, really helpful. So do you destroy? Do you ignore? Do you patronize? Or do you engage people in the conversation? Listen to what George Bernard Shaw says. He says the biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. It is no longer just talk between us, but it is how we talk that truly, truly matters. Our talk, ladies and gentlemen, is not accidental, right? Our talk is intentional. Our talk is action. But sometimes we are just not aware of how we talk. And those talk, whether you're aware or not, intentional or otherwise, they have consequences. How many of us, have said things in public like, oh yeah, this is really wonderful. Yeah, I agree, right? Let's do it, right? But then in our private thoughts bubbles, right, we're actually thinking something else completely different. Now, my question to everybody here is this: why do we do that? And what are the implications, if everybody in our company and our teams are doing just that, right? Say one thing, but think something else here. What is preventing us, for saying what we are thinking? Well, truth is this: there are many reasons that I can think of, but let me just for now share two reasons for the purpose of our conversations here. The first one, right, is our gauge of competency, right? And that is on the, I'm going to use this very simple metrics here to kind of demonstrate this, is our competency. How competent, are you and I? How knowledgeable are we in the topics that, we are currently talking about, all right? And the second axis, right, is our sense of psychological safety. In other words, how safe psychologically do I feel in front of you, in front of the team, together with the people in this conversation here, right? For me to speak my mind. Would I be attacked? Would I be ignored? Would I be patronized? Would my conversation be destroyed? Would people laugh at me and see me as, incompetent? Or would I be engaged by them and be supported by them, right? So let's say, right, go back to the graph again. Let's say, right, your sense of competency is low. So, that means you're not very familiar with the topic. You got lots of questions, right, that people are talking about, or there's a great sense of doubt about what people are talking about. So that is a sense that competency is low. And at the same time, let's assume that, your sense of psychological safety is also low. You don't feel very safe to speak up. You don't feel very confident that people will support what you're saying. So the likely default behavior is that you are probably likely to keep silent, or you might be saying something, out loud, but your thought bubbles is, thinking, something completely different. The default response to this essentially would be, don't ask. I better keep quiet. I don't ask anything. Now let me share with you, another example here. Now let's say that you are a whole lot more certain about what you know about the topics that is currently being discussed, right? So your competency is high. But then same thing, right? If your sense of psychological safety is low, then the default response, right, could be don't share, right? It's like, I know what's going on here. I know that you guys are wrong, but for whatever reason, I don't feel safe to speak up. And because of that, my default action essentially is don't share. It's like, let's see what happens, right? And then when it fails, then maybe I'll tell you, see, the last time I thought about it, I don't think it'll work. And people are like, why didn't you say it before, right? Well, it is about the psychological safety, right? It's about not sharing. And unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of teams are in this space here. A lot of teams are in the don't ask, don't share spaces here. And this is where trouble always happens. Because when voice is needed, but silence prevails, bad things almost always happen. And I want to tell you a quick story, right, that happened back in 2003. To be more precise, 16th of January, 2003. For those of you that were born back then and you are aware of what's going on, it was the launch of the space shuttle called Columbia. And on that morning, on the 16th of January 2003, Columbia took off, and it had a near picture perfect takeoff. It was beautiful. But as it was taking off, as the camera was following the shuttle, it was a very blurry camera, blurry image, right? An engineer, right, by the name of Rodney Rocha noticed that, something is not right. From the blurry videos of the takeoff, he noticed that something, has broken off from the space shuttle 81 seconds into the launch. That was how quick it was. 81 seconds into the launch, Rodney Rocher noticed something popping out from the space shuttle. And he raised the alarm to his superiors, right? And he told his superiors and said, look, I think we need to get help outside of NASA, to get clearer video images to identify what the potential problem was. Guess what? The managers of Rodney, the leaders of Rodney, right, essentially told him, not necessary, life goes on, forget about it, you're thinking too much, right? And, Columbia had already taken off, it's gone to space, right? And eventually Columbia was given, right, the green light to return home 8 days later. So 8 days later, after they completed their mission in space, they came back to Earth. As they entered the Earth's atmosphere, and this is what exactly happened, 16 minutes before touchdown, Columbia disintegrated. Now, what happened was this. Upon the investigation as to why Columbia exploded, they found that a piece of foam insulation had broken off from the space shuttle, when it was taking off. That was that little thing that Rodney Rocher saw, and it was a foam insulation the size of a briefcase. Now, when Columbia was re-entering the Earth atmosphere, because of that foam that hit the space shuttle, it caused a hole in the space shuttle wing, right? Hot air got into the plane and became overheated, and before you knew it, the whole entire Columbia space shuttle disintegrated. Now, at the investigation inquiry, Rodney Rocher was asked the question, why didn't he escalate the issue? Because what you saw was the right thing. Why didn't you escalate the issue? And the response that Rodney Rocher replied was, I can't. I was not able to. In the don't ask, don't share box, that I mentioned to you just now, very often my observation about people in this space here is simply because, they don't ask not because they're not willing, right? Just like Rodney Rocher, it's not that he's not willing. He was trying to escalate the issue here, right? Or it's that they're not curious, right? They're incurious in a sense. And in the don't share boxes here, my observation is that people in those boxes, they don't share not because they don't care. They do care. But very often we don't ask and we don't share what we must, simply because of two reasons. Number one, we may not know how to ask, or we may not know how to share. Or two, we may not feel safe or supported in asking or sharing. Our ability and freedom to have great conversations in our teams is key to the psychological safety that drives the continuous learning and growth in our organization. When voice is needed, but silence prevails, bad things do happen. And often, it is this lack of ability that people do not know how to ask or share, or they don't feel the sense of openness, empowerment, and safety to share, that created all the problems that we face in our organizations all the time. Rodney Rocher was willing to share. He was willing to ask. He was willing to share. But the inability and the lack of openness, empowerment, and psychological safety in his organization prevented him from doing that. And that cost the lives of all Columbia's astronauts, for that particular day. He could not ask what he asked, he could not ask what he must, and he could not share what he could. And we do not want to be stuck in this don't ask and don't share boxes here in our lives or in our teams. We need to learn to ask, when we must, and we need to share, what we should when we know. And to do this, right, in a psychologically safe space environment, there will be learning and growing. In other words, when we are not competent, but because it's safe, we dare to ask. And when we dare to ask, or when we encourage people to be asking, there will be learning and there will be growing. And in turn, what it really gives us is that there will be engagement and there will be innovation. How can we build an organization? How can we build a team that is psychologically safe, that allows us, to have a speak-up culture, that let us ask our question, share our concerns, speak our minds with curiosity, with candor, with confidence, with courage, so that we can engage each other without hesitation, challenge one another without fear, and be able to respond without being personal. And we can get our culture to go from one of status quo and silence to one of a culture of growth and voice. Very often we ask ourselves, how do we change the culture in our organization? Of course, like I said, it starts with the top, right? The higher you are, the more infectious you are on the psychological safety of your teams and organization. But it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're at the top or at the bottom. How we can impact, psychological safety, how we can impact, learning and engagement, growth and innovation. A lot of it lies with the way we talk. So my question, everybody, is this, right? Is your culture psychologically safe, right? If you think about your teams, if you think about your organizations today, is it safe, right? And there are 7 questions that you and I can ask to determine whether our culture is psychologically safe. So I'm going to very quickly share these 7 questions with you, right? The first question is this. If you make a mistake on your team, is it held against you, right? Do people go on a witch hunt to find out, who made the mistake and go penalize that guy? Well, if it is, I guess that organization or the team may not be that psychologically safe, right? So that's the first question. If you make a mistake on your team, is it held against you? The second question is this. Are you able to bring up problems and tough issues, right? It's just like Rodney Rocha, right? Was he able to bring up the issues, and what were the support and the empowerment and the openness that was given to him by his superiors here or by his colleagues here? So if you are able to do it, then your organization is likely to be more psychologically safe, compared to others here. Question number 3, do people on the team sometimes reject others for being different? I dare say that this is probably, the most common question that everybody would rate as a yes, because, human beings like to kind of gather with people, they are similar to us. And very often when we don't understand people, we unconsciously, through the way we talk, through the way we relate to them, we unconsciously, reject people, right? So do people on the team sometimes reject others for being different? Question number 4, is it safe to take risk, right? Is your organization safe to take risks? Does your organizations encourage the ability to fail fast, try fast, and learn fast, right? What about question number 5 here? Question number 5 is it difficult to ask other team members for help? And question number 6, do people on the team deliberately act to undermine your efforts? I really hope that this question number 6 doesn't happen to you, because that can be quite miserable. Because even if people who literally are out there just to sabotage you or just to harm you, no amount of effort on psychological safety is going to be effective here, because you got that opposing force, unless that force unfortunately have to be, or fortunately have to be removed somehow, right? So I hope this doesn't happen to you. Do people on the team deliberately act to undermine your efforts? And number 7 is this, right? Are your unique skills and talents being valued and utilized? So if you go through these 7 questions here, right, it gives you a very good idea of whether you are managing your team in a psychologically safe manner, or whether your organization is open and empowering for you to ask a question, speak your mind, and share your concerns without fear and consequences. Now let me ask you another question with regards again to psychological safety. So how do we build it? If we know that our team is this or that, then how do we build psychological safety? Well, essentially there are 5 different things that you and I can do, and they're not difficult things to do. The first one is to essentially help others feel included, right? Help people feel included. Now the fact is this, to deprive people from being included is literally demeaning their existence. It's literally canceling them out. Today in the cancel culture that we have, it's a horrible thing. Is that there's no room for diversity, there's no room for dissension, right? And because of that, you exclude people. And yet that is something that is so basic in every one of us, because to be included is the most basic of human needs here. Every one of us long to belong. Every one of us wants to be accepted. In fact, the need to be accepted is way more important, way more critical than anything else, in the organization. You join a new team, you join a new organization. If immediately the team accepted you, they included you in their conversation, I tell you, a lot of whatever you're doing is going to be a lot more easier. But if it takes you a month, 2 months for you to be included into the team, it takes a little while longer, right, before you become more effective, in that particular team. The need to be accepted is a very basic human need here. So when we are included, we somehow get a sense of shared identity with people that we're working with that gives us, the affirmation and the conviction, the affirmation and the conviction that we actually do matter, in those relationships here. It let us interact with people with less fear of rejection, embarrassment, or punishment. Inclusion gives us the confidence. Inclusion gives us the courage to engage people. So the first one is to help others feel included. The second thing that you and I can do to build psychological safety in our organization, again, like I said, it doesn't matter whether you are low in the rungs or you're high in leadership. Every one of us can do that. The only difference is the higher you go, the more impactful, the more influential, the more infectious you will be. And the second thing here is help others feel safe and learn, right? Help others feel safe and learn to grow. Sorry, I got distracted by the chat here. Help others feel safe to learn and to grow, right? Help others feel safe to learn and to grow. Now, it means simply this, right? It's about helping people, helping one another to be able to ask questions, to be able to give and receive feedback, to be able to experiment with new things. And this is the really, really big kicker here, right? To be able to give permission to one another to make mistakes. Making mistakes, ladies and gentlemen, is a certainty. It definitely will happen. It is not whether we will make mistakes, but it's a question of when are we going to make them, right? Of course, nobody in their right minds wants to make mistakes. Nobody wants to fail. Nobody wants that. It is always terrifying to be asking a question or speaking on something in a group setting because we fear of coming across or being seen by people as being stupid, right? Now, learning is well, the idea seems very refreshing and very, very tangible, right? But learning is intellectual. Learning is emotional. Learning is behavioral. In other words, learning is complicated, right? So it makes sense, right, for us to enable, right, the learner safety in our teams, the learner safety in our organization. Because when we give permission to people to fail and to make mistakes, we give them the power and ability to take risks that matter to us, that matter to our teams and organization. Risks that make us more agile, more innovative, and more creative. Making mistakes is a reality, it is a fact. But for us to help people feel safe and be learning from the mistakes, that is a choice that we must make. All right. So the second thing here is to help others feel safe, to learn and to grow. The third thing that we can do is to help others feel safe to contribute. Help others feel safe to contribute. And what that means simply is this, right? Every one of us, we want to be valued by others. We want to be useful to the people around us. So for us to be able to help people see their value and see their usefulness, we have to start identifying, we have to start, recognizing and seeing each other's unique contributions. Identify people for what they're really, really good in, recognize their unique strength, recognize their unique skills, and then begin to create those spaces for one another to make a distinct difference in the way we work, in the way we contribute, in the way we impact, the work and the relationships around us. People thrive, ladies and gentlemen, when they have the freedom and the opportunity to do what they do best every day, right? None of us, like to be micromanaged, right? Why? Because being micromanaged doesn't give us that freedom or the discretion to reach our potential. It does not do that. We all want to be empowered, right, according to our strength, because that encourages us and it draws us to bring out our very best efforts in what we do. When you and I are able to help people feel safe to contribute, we essentially are building trust in the relationships. We essentially are showing compassion to one another. We're creating a platform of stability for us to do our work well. And last but not least, we are inspiring hope, in one another, in the work we do and in the relationships, that we have. And the fourth one is this, right? It's about help others feel safe to challenge the status quo. Help other people feel safe to challenge the status quo. And by that, I mean, this, right? You and I, we can create the safety, of helping people challenge safely by first being two things: being intentionally curious, and number two, being intellectually humble. Let me say that again: being intentionally curious and being intellectually humble. All right. So what does this mean? To be curious is to be more open, to be more seeking, to be more inquisitive. It is less about me saying no to you, but more about me asking, hey, why is that a good idea? Right? And to be intellectually humble is to give respect to you as a gift. It's free. I'm going to give it to you even before you ask, right? And to be intellectually humble is to empower you and to give you, permission to dissent and to disagree without the risk of retaliation, without the risk of damaging, right, your personal standing or your reputation. It is telling myself that I do not know all the answers, and I want to acknowledge you. I want to acknowledge your presence. I want to acknowledge your views, no matter how different they are from mine, because I want you and I to grow and innovate and create together. So this is the fourth one, right? Help others feel safe to challenge the status quo. And the last one is the most important one. It's about helping others feel safe by talking better, right? Helping others feel safe by talking better. Now, why is that? Well, the answer is a really simple one, and I've been talking about this because we are habitual and unconscious in the way we talk, right? We don't think about how we talk, we just simply talk. And whenever we are habitual and unconscious in our talk, ladies and gentlemen, the risk of us not being heard the way we intended exponentially increases. Remember the destroy, the ignore, the patronize, and the engage, conversational responses that I shared with you just now? Well, that's exactly what it is. How have you been talking to people around you? How have you been talking to your wife, to your husbands, to your partners? How have you been talking to your subordinates, to your leaders here? Are we consciously destroying, ignoring, patronizing, engaging, or are we unconscious about that? The idea is a really simple one, ladies and gentlemen. Our words actually matters, right? What we do in our conversation, our words matter, but how we say it matters a whole lot more. Our words can either create or destroy psychological safety, to include, to learn, to contribute, and to challenge. It is no longer just talk, ladies and gentlemen, but it's how we talk that truly matters. And this, like I mentioned to you, is the fifth and most important critical things. It is the non-negotiable thing that we must do to build psychological safety in our teams, in our organization. It is something that we cannot do without. It is to help others talk better so that they can include safely, they can learn safely, they can contribute safely, and they can challenge safely. And the conclusion is that the space, the team, the organization is psychologically safe. Everything that we do is conversations, right? Psychological safety is conversation, inclusion is conversation, learning and growing is conversation, contributing is conversation, challenging is conversation. Amazing things happen between people, ladies and gentlemen, when the quality of our conversations is good. Where there are great conversations, there will be great psychological safety. Where there are great conversations in inclusion, there will be acceptance, there will be belonging. Where there are conversations in learning, there will be the courage to make mistakes and learn. Where there are conversations in contribution, people feel valued and they feel important and they are purpose-driven. And where there are conversations in challenge, our teams will be curious, our teams will be creative, our teams will be innovative. And great conversations is not necessarily about agreeing more or disagreeing less with one another. Great conversation is really about learning, how to agree or disagree more productively and more safely together. So the question for you and I is this: how can we talk better? And I want to introduce to you a very simple tool in how we can do this. It is called Soundwave. Now, Soundwave is a small little tiny company that is in Bristol in the United Kingdom. And they've been doing a lot of work in the past 10 years, right? Figuring out how do people talk. And they found out something really interesting. The way you and I talk, actually comprise of three big ways, right? The way we ask, the way we suggest, and the way we tell. And within the ask, suggest, and tell category, right, there are altogether 3 different voices, right? So within the ask category is how do we probe, how do we inquire, and how do we diagnose. Within suggest is how do we articulate, how do we advocate, how do we advise, right? And within tell is how do we critique, how do we challenge, and how do we correct. And what Soundwave found out was really interesting. They found out that the way we talk is habitual, and we have a preferred way of talking, and we are unconscious. So if you go onto Soundwave, right, and you get onto their website, you can actually do a simple assessment called the Brilliance 3 to find out your preferred habitual unconscious way of talking. I'll share more details on this later, right? But let's say you get on there and you do your assessment, right? You will be able to find out, in the simplest of the reports that they have, what I call your top 3 brilliance voices, all right? So your voice out of these 9 different voices, could be inquire, diagnose, challenge, or it could be probe, critique, or advocate, right? Or it could be critique, challenge, or correct, right? So there's a number of different combinations when you do your Brilliance 3 with Soundwave here. And the whole idea is a really simple one. Every one of us is different in the way you and I talk. You are uniquely you, and at the same time, you are habitually you. You don't really think about how you talk. You just talk. And because you and I, we talk habitually, you and I will constantly be habitually impacting people around us, right? Think about it. We'll be habitually shaping how others are experiencing us and perceiving us, whether is it good or whether is it bad. Now, we could be unconsciously building psychological safety for all you know, but on the same extent, right, we could also be unconsciously tearing it down. You're uniquely you, and at the same time, you are habitually you. We run the risk, ladies and gentlemen, of not being heard the way we intended. And one of the benefits of Soundwave is that it helps us to be conscious in how we talk. And among other things, like I said, it shows us our 3 preferred habitual unconscious voices. And with that knowledge, you are able to learn the impact of your voices, and you're able to change how you talk, for the right outcomes, the way you and I want it. So let me just very quickly, help you understand a little bit more of that in the next 5 minutes, right? Now, say for example, if you have the preferred voice, right? Let me share a screen with you. If you have the preferred voice, right, of inquiry. Now, this is a voice of engagement. So you are curious. You are constantly seeking out ideas, right? You are always trying to figure out what are the new possibility and perspective in the people they are talking to. Now, the inquire voice is a much needed and powerful voice to create the psychological safety of inclusion, right? It creates space for people to learn. It creates space for people to contribute their ideas. These are the other 2 spaces that the inquire voice is really, really good in building. And when used skillfully, it builds tremendous psychological safety by giving attention to people's personalities, to people's ideas, to people's opinions here. But the reverse is really interesting. If you're unconscious about using that voice, you're unaware, and you're constantly using it and overusing it and sometimes accentuating the inquiry voice, instead of engaging people, you come across as interrogating people. And to interrogate instills fear in people, and fear shuts people down, and people essentially shut up, right? In other words, low psychological safety. Let me give you another example of another voice here, the critique voice. If you have the critique voice as your preferred voice, it is a voice of decision. You see yourself as rational and a voice of reason, right? Because you critique to understand, you critique to reason, you critique to understand the pros and cons so that you can weigh out the options and make the best decisions in the things that you do. In the space of psychological safety, critique is a fantastic voice in creating the safety of learning and the safety of contribution. And when used skillfully, people are more open to critique. They feel safe and empowered to be more transparent in the decision process. But the reverse is true. If you're unskillful in the use of the critique voice, you're unaware, you're overusing it, you're accentuating it, then your critique voice comes across as a criticizing voice. People do not sense your concern, but on the reverse, they may unfairly sense your criticism, right? Let me show you one last voice here, and that is a voice of challenge. The voice of challenge, ladies and gentlemen, is a voice of positive change, right? You want the best for your teams. You want to create the pathways for excellence here, for growth. It is a voice that helps people see new perspective. It is a voice that helps people think new ideas. Now, this voice of challenge is the perfect voice in creating, guess what? The psychological safety space of challenge, to challenge the status quo. Because when you are able to use the voice of challenge skillfully, it showcases our curiosity and it demonstrates, our intellectual humility. Now, this is incredibly attractive to people, and it draws people to you and give you the influence to shape the outcomes you want through the safety of positive change and disruption. But once again, if you're unaware of this voice that you have, you're unconscious, you're overusing it, then you may come across to people as attacking them. Now, have you ever wondered, why some people that you talk to, they are constantly attacking you? Perhaps they're not attacking you. Perhaps they're trying to challenge you, but they just do not know how to do it. Once again, the biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Our choices and intentions may be clear and good, but how we talk may not convey those intentions. It is no longer just talk, it is how we talk that truly matters. So in conclusion, let me just wrap up the key things that we have talked about today so far. The speak up culture is something that we want, and in order to do that, we need to have psychological safety. And to build psychological safety, there are 5 things that we can do. Number 1, help others feel safe to be included, to learn and grow, to contribute, and to challenge. And the 5th most important thing, and the most critical and the most non-negotiable thing that you must do to build psychological safety is help others feel safe by talking better. We are habitual and unconscious in the way we talk, but even though our talk may be fixed, how we talk is extremely fluid. The question for you and I, ladies and gentlemen, is this: we actually can find out about our voices, we can know our voices, we can choose our voices, we can own our voices, and we can target our voices to build the psychological safety that we want for a thriving team and organization here. We have the ability to change how we talk to build the environment that we want. Know your voices, own it, and use it so that you can shift the dialogue when you want to, change the conversation when you have to, in order to shape the outcome the way you want to.